Seven Little Johnstons, Liz says it seems difficult to make up with her sister Anna. A lot of things have gone wrong since Anna Johnston left Seven Little Johnstons. A lot of fans followed her and boycotted the hit show. So, in the end, the show has lost a lot of fans. The people who are still there keep talking about how the family doesn't work well together and keep condemning them. Trent and Amber had already talked about Anna leaving the program. Amber's icy attitude has gotten her a lot of angry messages from fans. Now, Amber Jr., Liz has once again blamed her sister Anna for everything, just like her mother did. She talked about the chance of them getting back together in a recent exclusive interview. Also, she said that it is quite difficult. Liz, a star of Seven Little Johnstons, is enjoying her pregnancy glow as she gets ready to have her second child. In an exclusive interview, the soon-to-be mother finally spoke up about her pregnant journey so far. She also said that this pregnancy is harder for her than her last one. Her prior pregnancy was a lot easier than this one. Liz has said that she has been experiencing a lot of trouble with nausea and severe morning sickness for the past few weeks, so she consumes anything she can get down her throat. Because she feels sick, her cravings have gone out the window. This time, she doesn't want anything, unlike her past pregnancy when she wanted sweets and fruits. Liz also said, "It's been a wild ride." She is ready for her C-section on September 1st. Liz, a star of Seven Little Johnstons, finally said how she felt about Anna. They hate each other so much that they can't get along. Liz and the rest of the family kept blaming Anna for everything and kept her out of family functions on purpose. Now she says that Anna's leaving the program has made it difficult for them to get back together. The sisters still aren't talking to each other. In a recent episode, Liz also spoke up for her mother's point of view. "We can choose to be on the show, and Anna can too, but she didn't want to," she said. Even though she indicated she hoped for a future reconciliation, many fans believed her tone didn't sound real at all. In addition, Liz said that there are always two sides to every story, and that the tabloids didn't tell the whole truth. But she stated she didn't know what it would take to make things right between them. But she and her family were willing to talk to Anna, she said. She remarked, "I hope that one day she will want to come and talk to us and work this out." She wants Anna to fix things again, but she keeps cutting Anna out of her life. A lot of things seem to have happened in the meanwhile that the fans don't know about. So, Liz believes it will take a long time to fix things. Liz has gotten a lot of bad press because of this exclusive interview with Access Hollywood. But in the world of reality TV, where every smile is scrutinized and every silence seems louder than words, the family at the center of Seven Little Johnstons found themselves drifting apart more than anyone could have imagined. What once seemed like a close-knit and strong household slowly fell apart under the weight of unspoken grievances, emotional distance, and choices that would change their lives forever. Most people knew Elizabeth Johnston as Liz. She sat quietly by the window of her softly lit living room, her hands resting gently on her growing belly. The evening sun faded into a muted orange glow. The world outside seemed calm and predictable, but her mind was anything but. Thoughts of her estranged sister Anna weighed heavily on her heart, refusing to fade no matter how much time passed or how many interviews she gave trying to explain a situation she herself didn't fully understand. Pregnancy had changed a lot for Liz, both physically and emotionally. The waves of nausea and exhaustion seemed almost like a sign of the chaos in her life. She was trying to focus on getting ready for her second child by carefully organizing baby clothes and planning for her scheduled C-section in early September, but there was an emptiness that no amount of preparation could fill. Deep down, she knew that her family was incomplete without Anna, even though she had a hard time admitting it. The cameras had captured many moments over the years, from holidays filled with laughter to tense family discussions, but they could never fully capture the quiet change that began long before Anna chose to leave the show. It started with small arguments that were ignored, misunderstandings that were never really resolved, and a growing feeling that Anna was no longer being heard in a family where voices often overlapped but rarely listened. Anna, on the other hand, chose distance not because she didn't care, but because it was a way to protect herself. Getting away from the spotlight gave her something she hadn't felt in years: control over her own story, freedom from constant judgment, and the space to rediscover who she was outside of the expectations of her family and the millions of people who watched their lives unfold on screen. But even though they were far apart, the bond between sisters couldn't be broken so easily. There were nights when Anna would scroll through old pictures, frozen moments in time when laughter came easily and love felt simple. She would wonder how things had gotten so tense, how conversations had turned into fights, and how silence had replaced even the most basic attempts to reconnect. Liz often defended her family's point of view when she was at home. She repeated what she had come to believe, that everyone had a choice, that Anna chose to leave, and that reconciliation would take work from both sides. But underneath those carefully chosen words was a layer of doubt, because even she couldn't ignore the fact that reaching out had become more about waiting than acting, and more about expecting than understanding. Amber, their mother, stood firm in her decision. To outsiders, her words often sounded cold or distant, but in her mind, she was protecting the family she still had by keeping things structured and in order in a situation that felt more and more out of control, even if it meant making it harder for Anna to come back. Trent was stuck in the middle and struggled to keep things balanced. He often chose not to speak anything, but his silent presence spoke volumes about the stress in the family. He watched his girls drift more apart without understanding how to bring them back together. As the days went by and Liz's due date got closer, the idea of reconciliation became both more urgent and more distant. She often talked about wanting to have a conversation in the future, but there was always a hesitation, a pause that made it seem like she wasn't quite ready to face that conversation might reveal, the truths that had been avoided and the accountability that could be shared instead of being placed solely on one person. Anna, on the other hand, kept building a life outside of the show. It was quieter and more true to her, and she could make decisions without worrying about what other people thought. But even though she was independent, there was still a small part of her that hoped, maybe unrealistically, that one day her family would reach out to her not with expectations, but with understanding. There was no longer merely a physical or emotional gap between them. It had become a pattern, a cycle in which both sides waited for the other to take the first step, both thinking they were open to reconciliation while unconsciously reinforcing the very obstacles that kept them apart. The story stayed unfinished, not because their love had faded, but because it had become buried under layers of pride, miscommunication, and unresolved pain. The silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. Two sisters who used to share everything now lived separate lives, connected only by memories and the fragile hope that they might find their way back to each other someday. But Alex didn't see Allie in a dramatic, slow-motion scene like in the movies. Instead, it was a quiet, almost unnoticed moment that would stick with him forever. It happened on an ordinary afternoon when he least expected anything in his life to change, but somehow, everything did. Alex had always been someone who lived in his own head, carefully watching the world around him and trying to figure out where he fit in. Because he grew up in a family with strong personalities, he often found comfort in quiet places where he could think, dream, and picture a future that felt uniquely his, even if he didn't know what that future looked like yet. Allie, on the other hand, had a warm and steady presence. She didn't have to ask for attention to get it. Her kindness and honesty drew people to her naturally. When she smiled, it wasn't just polite or casual. It was the kind of smile that made people feel seen, understood, and unexpectedly at ease. Their first conversation happened almost by accident. It started with something small and simple, like a moment of awkwardness that turned into laughter, and then it turned into a longer conversation that neither of them had planned, but both of them hoped wouldn't end too soon. It was comforting how well they understood each other without having to explain too much. As days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months, their bond grew in a way that felt natural rather than forced, as if they were both discovering something that had been waiting for them all along. They didn't need to rush or define it too quickly because it was strong enough to grow at its own pace. Alex opened up to Allie in ways he had never done before. He told her about his insecurities, his fears about not always fitting in, and the quiet doubts he had about whether he would find someone who really understood him. Allie listened patiently and without judging, never interrupting, and instead offered comfort in a way that felt real instead of rehearsed. Being with Alex made Allie see the world in a slightly different way. It reminded her that strength doesn't always come from being loud or confident. It often comes from being honest, vulnerable, and willing to keep trying even when things are uncertain. She admired that about him more than she could easily say. Their relationship wasn't perfect. No real connection ever is. There were times when misunderstandings happened, insecurities came back, and the stress of family expectations and public attention made things feel heavier than they should have been. But even then, they chose to stay, talk, and work through the discomfort instead of leaving. They talked for hours late at night about their hopes, fears, and the kind of future they wanted to build together. Even though they didn't have all the answers, they both knew that as long as they faced things together, they would figure it out. Alex started to see that love for him wasn't about big gestures or perfect moments. It was about being there for someone every day, even when things were hard, and listening when it would be easier to shut down. It was also about choosing someone over and over again, even when things weren't easy. In turn, Allie learned that love could be both soft and strong at the same time. It could provide her comfort without taking away her independence. She also learned that being with someone didn't mean losing herself. Instead, it meant finding new pieces of herself via shared experiences and mutual support. There were little things that meant everything, like peaceful walks where they didn't have to say much, shared looks that meant more than words ever could, and simple gestures of care that showed them how much they cared about each other, even when life got busy or hard. Their friendship became stronger over time, and other people could see it. It wasn't loud or theatrical. It was steady, real, and based on a kind of understanding that can't be easily articulated, just felt. Even while the future was still unpredictable, as it always is, Alex and Allie learned to accept that uncertainty together, not as something to be afraid of, but as something to explore. They knew that whatever happened next, they wouldn't have to face it alone. But in the quiet rhythm of a small southern town where every sunset seemed to hold a soft golden promise and every street held memories of laughter, growth, and unspoken dreams, Elizabeth Liz Johnston found herself at a crossroads in her life. The expectations of her family, the weight of her responsibilities, and the delicate complexity of love all came together in an emotional journey that she could no longer ignore, especially as her relationship with Bryce grew deeper, stronger, and more complicated with each passing day. People always said that Liz was strong in her silence and determined in her eyes. She was a young woman who grew up in a close-knit family that taught her that love wasn't just about affection, but also about patience, understanding, and sometimes sacrifice. But when Bryce came into her life, everything she thought she knew about love began to change in small but powerful ways, like a tide slowly reshaping the shoreline. Bryce was not the kind of person who demanded attention. He was calm and grounded. But somehow, when he walked into a room, he filled it with his presence. For Liz, that presence was both comforting and challenging. He gave her stability, but he also forced her to face parts of herself that she had kept hidden under layers of responsibility and expectation. Their relationship didn't start with big, dramatic moments or big promises. Instead, it started with small, meaningful interactions that slowly built a foundation of trust. They talked quietly under the open sky and laughed together, which seemed to make the stress of everyday life go away. As those moments added up, Liz realized that Bryce was becoming more than just a part of her life. He was becoming someone she couldn't imagine her future without. But as their relationship grew stronger, so did the pressures around them. Being part of a family that lived most of their lives in the public eye meant that every choice, every disagreement, and every step forward was often met with opinions, expectations, and sometimes criticism. For Liz, balancing her love for Bryce with her loyalty to her family was an emotional tightrope that she had to walk carefully to avoid losing herself in the process. Liz sometimes wondered if love was supposed to be this hard. She wondered if the constant push and pull between independence and togetherness was a sign of growth or a warning she should not ignore. During those times, she often thought about the quiet strength Bryce showed, how he stayed steady even when things were uncertain, as if he believed in their relationship even when she found it hard to do so herself. Bryce, on the other hand, had his own problems to deal with. Loving someone like Liz meant understanding not only who she was as a person, but also the world she came from. which was full of strong personalities, deep connections, and family dynamics that could sometimes feel too much to handle. But despite these challenges, he chose to stay, support her, and show through his actions that his commitment was not something that would easily fade. As time went on, their relationship changed from the early stages of excitement and discovery to something deeper and more meaningful. This new phase required effort, communication, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. It was during this time that both Liz and Bryce realized that love wasn't just about the good times, but also about how they got through the tough times together. Of course, there were disagreements, times when words were misunderstood, and emotions ran high. But even then, there was a connection that wouldn't break. They both knew that they were still on the same side and working towards something that mattered to both of them, even if they didn't always agree on how to get there. One night, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Liz sat next to Bryce in a rare moment of quiet. In that silence, she realized something that had been growing inside her all along. Love isn't about having all the answers or avoiding uncertainty. It's about choosing to stay, to try, and to believe that there is a future together, even when the way forward isn't completely clear. Bryce looked at her with a calm but sincere expression, and in that moment, without needing to say anything big or dramatic, they both knew that their relationship, with all its problems and difficulties, was something worth holding on to. And so their journey went on, not as a perfect love story, but as a real one, full of growth, learning, and the kind of connection that could only be built over time, with effort and the willingness to face both the good and bad times together, knowing that it wasn't about being perfect, but about how strong their bond was becoming. But the morning sun softly poured through the Johnston family home, spreading across the walls as if it knew that this was not just another ordinary day, but a moment that had been years in the making. It was a moment filled with perseverance, quiet sacrifices, and an unwavering belief in the idea that no dream is ever too late to pursue. On this day, Amber Johnston was not just a mother and a wife. She was a woman standing on the edge of a life milestone she had fought tirelessly to achieve. Amber woke up earlier than usual, long before the rest of the house stirred. She sat quietly at the edge of her bed, holding her graduation cap in her hands and running her fingers over the fabric. Memories flooded back to her in waves. Late nights spent studying while the rest of the family slept, juggling assignments with parenting duties, and doubts that crept in when things got too much. But through it all, there was always a voice inside her reminding her that she was doing this not only for herself, but for her children, to show them that growth never stops and that it is never too late to chase knowledge. As the house slowly came to life, Trent walked into the room with a proud smile that said more than words ever could. He put his hand gently on Amber's shoulder and reminded her of how far she had come. His voice was full of love and admiration because he had seen every step of her journey, every struggle, every small victory, and every time she chose not to give up, even when it would have been easier to do so. The kids were buzzing with excitement downstairs, and their voices were overlapping as they playfully argued about who was more excited for the ceremony. Each of them was secretly proud in their own way, because seeing their mother go back to college and overcome obstacles had changed something inside them and planted a seed of determination that would shape their own futures in ways they were only beginning to understand. Amber took a moment to really take it all in as she got ready for the ceremony, carefully putting on her gown and fixing her cap in front of the mirror. She saw not only her reflection, but also the journey that had brought her there, a journey that was not perfect, not easy, but very meaningful. In that moment, she let herself feel proud, something she rarely did because she had spent so much of her life putting others first. The drive to the college campus felt different from any other drive she had taken before. It was as if every mile had a story and every turn had a memory. When they finally got there, seeing the campus full of graduates in their gowns made her feel like she belonged. Amber was no longer just a student balancing life's responsibilities. She was part of something bigger, a community of people who had all fought their own battles to get to this moment. The ceremony was full of emotion as names were called one by one. Each name stood for years of hard work and determination. When Amber's name was finally called, time seemed to stop for a moment. She stood up and walked toward the stage, her heart racing with excitement, pride, and disbelief. This was real. It was happening, and she had made it. Trent and the kids cheered louder than anyone else in the audience. Their voices were full of joy and admiration. To them, Amber wasn't just graduating, she was proving something powerful that would stay with them forever. That determination and resilience can get you through anything. Amber held her diploma tightly in her hands as she accepted it, as if to ground herself in the moment. When she turned to face the audience, her eyes searched until they found her family. In that moment, everything felt complete, because this achievement was not hers alone. It belonged to all of them, to every moment they had supported her and every sacrifice they had made together. After the ceremony, the family gathered outside, hugging Amber and taking pictures that would remind them of what is possible when you don't give up. As they celebrated, Amber realized that this was not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one full of new opportunities, challenges, and dreams waiting to be pursued. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the day's excitement had died down, Amber sat with her family and thought about everything they had done together. In that calm, peaceful moment, she said something simple but powerful. No matter where life takes them, they should always remember that growth is a lifelong journey and that one of the best things a person can do is have the courage to keep going. Amber put her graduation cap on the shelf at the end of the night. It wasn't an end, but a sign of everything she had done and everything that was still to come. It was a reminder that even when life is busy and full of doubt and uncertainty, it is always possible to rise, learn, and do something truly meaningful. Hello, lovely viewers. Welcome to my channel. I'm Sabrina, and I hope you're having a great day. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you appreciate the video.